Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies, and this is the story of the Learned Pig by Manly P. Hall. An article from the P.R.S. Journal, Volume 23, Number 3, Winter 1963. The story of the Learned Pig. The 400th anniversary of the birth of William Shakespeare occurs in 1964. As may be expected, elaborate plans are being made for the celebration of monumentous occasion. Needless to say, there will be some dissenting voices among the intelligentsia, and we may expect some revival of interest in the celebrated Bacon-Shakespeare controversy. Reasonable doubts as to the authorship of the Shakespearean plays have been expressed for a long time, and a considerable literature has developed around this literary feud. When the subject was brought to the attention of Rudyard Kipling, he found consolation in the thought that whichever of the contenders one chose to support, they were both Englishmen. Our own Mark Twain was a vigorous Baconian, and in his little book, Is Shakespeare Dead?, will be found his humorous but pointed conclusion about the authorship of the plays. One of the most curious and least known publications bearing upon the great controversy is a pamphlet which appeared in England under the date of June 26, 1786. It is named The Story of the Learned Pig, and on the half title it is noted that the price is 2s. 6d. The work is anonymous and is described as having been written by an officer of the Royal Navy. One of the most curious circumstances about this publication is that only one copy is known to have survived. There may be others hidden elsewhere, but if so, they are unrecorded in the book trade and have not appeared on the market. The publication is ornamented with an engraved frontispiece, reproduced herewith. Frontispiece of the Story of the Learned Pig. We have in our library a photostatic copy of this unique original, which I secured a number of years ago through the kindness of John Howell, the San Francisco book dealer. Mr. Howell had given considerable time to this particular item, but told me that he had learned little more than the book itself revealed. The work is presented as autobiographical, with the elusive officer of the Royal Navy acting as amanuensis. It would seem that for some reason or other, a trained pig was being exhibited at Sadler's Wells Theater. It must have been a highly gifted animal, for one day, while the amanuensis was sitting quietly in the parlor, there was a gentle rapping at the door, which when opened revealed the learned pig, standing jauntily on his hind legs. The pig managed to bow very gracefully, and after striding majestically into the room, apologized for his unexpected intrusion. The officer of the Royal Navy was not especially surprised by the sudden appearance of his porcine visitor. This was no doubt due to the fact that the member of His Majesty's naval forces was a believer in the Pythagorean theory of metempsychosis or transmigration. He was perfectly sympathetic with the idea that souls pass from one kind of body to another, so he politely invited the pig to sit down and explain the reason for his visit. The rest of the work is mostly in the first person, with the pig explaining his extraordinary career, as might be expected in a fantasy of this kind. The learned pig had taken part in many of the important events of history, about which he was able to furnish intimate if devious details. He had also passed through many humble embodiments, about which there was little of lasting value to relate, but which had, in one way or another, contributed to his intellectual stature. It is obvious that the unknown author of the book was somewhat of a scholar, and held many ideas rather eccentric for his time. It is also reasonably certain that the little volume, which extended to 116 pages, duodecimo, was inspired by something more important than rather undistinguished comedy. The writer was aiming at some particular purpose, and it becomes obvious that about the only possible explanation falls within the area of the Bacon-Shakespeare controversy. Unless there is a wealth of double meaning, the story would be scarcely worth reading. Even the relevant parts of the tale are confusing and somewhat contradictory. After spending an incarnation in the body of a greyhound, and being at length buried in his master's garden with many marks of distinction. The learned pig was fortunate enough to gain the possession of a human body, as sometimes occurred. In this embodiment, his parents were of low extraction, his mother being a seller of fish and his father a water carrier. In the course of time, the humanly embodied pig held horses' heads at the entrance to theaters, and made on occasion honest or dishonest penny by the devious means peculiar to old London. The implication seems to be that our pig had taken on the form of William Shakespeare, but later it would appear that he retained some aspects of his piggish identity and refers to Shakespeare as a person separate from himself, but whose career he fully understood and appreciated. After describing some details that led to Shakespeare's departure from London, which had been falsified by historians, the learned pig makes a statement about Shakespeare that seems to justify the existence of the book. With equal falsehood, he had been fathered with many spurious dramatic pieces: Hamlet, Othello, As You Like It, The Tempest, and Midsummer's Night Dream, 4-5. Of all which I confess myself to be the author, and that I should turn poet is not to be wondered at, since nothing is more natural than to contract the ways and manners of those with whom we live in habits of strict intimacy. The Baconians read this riddle without much difficulty. The learned pig is Bacon, whose crest was the boar, and who is frequently pictured in emblem books in the form of this animal. Bacon is therefore the transmigrating pig, who takes on many forms and appearances in his philosophical and political activities. The pig seems to identify himself with Shakespeare, assuming the mask of the playwright, but in describing his many embodiments to his amanuensis, he points out that it was his own genius that was responsible for the production of the plays attributed to William Shakespeare. This little book, together with The Life and Adventures of Common Sense by Herbert Lawrence, London 1769, and The Romance of Yachting, Voyage the First by C. Hart, New York 1848, are probably the earliest volumes to directly attribute the Shakespearean plays to Francis Bacon. All do so in a more or less indirect way, but the implications are difficult to deny. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.